Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for day 1539 of our daily content grind. So today we are tackling a Patreon request, and that is to conquer an area that Transformers has never quite gotten it right. Because we have had these acclaimed animated series, we have had billion-dollar blockbuster movies, we have had award-winning comic books. The one thing that Transformers has never really succeeded in media-wise is video games. And it seems so weird because it seems like a great franchise to produce a video game from, both from a nostalgia-bait standpoint, but also just as a fun gameplay variety standpoint, right? Now, we do agree that there is such a thing as a good Transformers video game, right? Okay, we could go, typical stuff with like War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron. We could talk about Transformers Devastation. We might even go back to like the Armada game on PS2 if we're feeling a little bit cheeky. But that said, none of that really escaped our fandom. None of it breached this cultural zeitgeist and became like our super popular game or anything. I don't even think War for Cybertron sold 1 million copies, if I'm being honest. I think it sold just enough to warrant the sequel. So I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for that perfect Transformers game. And that is what my buddy Joe has requested. Create my perfect Transformers game. Now, I'm giving you essentially an elevator pitch. I am not really going to go into like fine gameplay mechanics. I'm not going to go into like detailed story elements and nuance, etc., etc. I'm not going to tell you voice actors. I'm not going to tell you programmers, designers, artists. I'm just going to give you like the stuff I'd like to see in a Transformers game. And I think a lot of the flaws of the previous games can be ironed out. For instance, Transformers Devastation is one of the best Transformers games you'll ever find. I think, for my money, it's the best game. That said, what you are seeing here is the bulk of the combat. And let's be honest here, the combat in it is fun. But the combat in it is based on a melee combat system. And I don't know Transformers for melee combat. Like maybe live action stuff, yeah. But like if I'm going vintage, and this game would be set in some kind of pseudo G1 narrative, right? It might be set in modern times. We might throw some modern characters in there. But for the most part, it will be G1 centric because I would kind of go for nostalgia. I want to play as Optimus Prime, like the one that is iconic. But my issue here is Transformer battles do not look like this. Transformer battles look like this. So we need shooting and blasting, and we need multiple Transformers in the mix. Devastation does have like a sidekick character kind of addition to it, but nothing that really comes into, nothing really comes into gameplay strictly. But we're gonna ape that a little bit. My envisioning would be like a team of two, so like one character to play as and be your primary fighter, and then another character to be your backup. And the backup would be just an NPC that's designed to help you out in a fight, but it would also be something that you could determine before the match, or before the level starts. Focus on these things. Okay, so if I want you to focus on attack, it gets aggressive, and it genuinely is trying to help me out in battle rather than just keep enemies busy. If I wanted to focus on collecting, then it's going around finding all the items in an area while I am dealing with the main threats. It's still in the combat. It's still shooting, but it's mostly just drawing attention. It's not doing any massive damage or anything, but it is finding health pickups like energon cubes and maybe not ammunition. I haven't decided if there's an ammo system in this. Essentially, no, it's doing all the fetching, which is keeping my health up during a fight. Or I can set it to scouting, which will mean the backup character is now looking for alternate paths, looking for hidden areas or things like that. So if you are stuck on a stage because there's an enemy you just can't get through, then maybe you swap your backup character for someone who scouts. And then that will open up like an alternate path that takes you around said tough enemy. Or, pick a heavy bruiser, pick a Grimlock or something and just go full melee or full aggressive attack mode and try to just batter it down. But the core of that is going to be actual weapon gameplay. It's going to be a shooting game because that's what you expect with Transformers. But when I think of like shooting games, the one that comes to mind is Ratchet and Clank. And I would do this third person, by the way. That's the one thing I didn't like about Reactivate's idea. I didn't want first person. I want to be able to see the robot I'm playing as. So, actually, was it? God, I think it was. Never mind, scratch that. I'm thinking of the trailer that was in first person. Never mind. I'm being a goofy. So, it does, when I think third person shooters, I think Ratchet and Clank. More so than like any kind of like modern, Call of Duty style stuff or whatever. Mostly just because this has more of the vibe that I am interested in, but also because I think the way that game handles itself and balances its core gameplay with other things to do is very, very good. And it works as a good roadmap for what I would like to see in a Transformer game. We'll get to that in a bit. Just keep in mind, I'm keeping that style in mind here. Nothing super realistic, more just like a for fun kind of shooting game. Now, let's talk cast, because we need to know who we can actually play as in said game. So, ideally, in this particular game, I would have 7 playable characters. Enough to have a nice variety of both people I want to personally play as and characters to be my backup. So for the Autobots, and there would be 2 separate campaigns. There would be an Autobot campaign and a Decepticon campaign. But for the Autobots, I am thinking Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, obvious ones, Ironhide, Elita 1, because I need some girls in there, and Elita's, rising in the rankings here. Prowl, Sideswipe, Grimlock, and Trax. And Trax is a little bit of an oddball thrown in. You don't get to see him take the spotlight very often in a situation like this, but I need him. I need him for a very specific reason. Meanwhile, on the Decepticon side of things, Megatron, Starscream, and Soundwave are obvious. For the purposes of gameplay mechanics, we would be giving Soundwave a vehicle mode of some type. It would be more like an all-terrain truck, similar to what he's been depicted on in like Cyberverse. But on top of that, I would go with Slipstream, because again, I want some girls on the roster. Barricade, because I want a car on the Decepticon side of things. And that'd probably be more along the lines of Evergreen Barricade, not like we just we repainted Prowl Barricade. I want them to be unique. And then I would throw in, this is difficult because so many Decepticons, like after the core 3, for independent Decepticons, you have Shockwave, who I need for something else in the game. But you also have like triple changers and combiners of some sort, either like Reflector style or Gestalt style. So I would throw in as my last 2 playables for the Decepticons, Blitzwing and Astrotrain. I might have to storyline a reason why they are in whatever alt mode they are in. But, for instance, like Blitzwing would be a tank, and then Astrotrain would be in his train mode, which would seem a little bit silly, driving around and actually being able to do things that trains can't, like turn their wheels. But Cybertronian, I can get away with it. More importantly, though, I want balances on both sides, right? So it's hard to balance, like, Bumblebee with anyone in the Decepticon roster. So that's a little bit of a miss. But like, I want Astrotrain in his train mode to complement Optimus Prime in his truck mode, because they both have the same abilities in the vehicle mode of like charging and ramming enemies. Megatron would be a tank. I don't have a tank on the Autobot side. Didn't feel like I needed like Warpath or anything on there. But Grimlock kind of makes up. Grimlock would definitely operate like a tank. And then things like I have like Ironhide as my like big bruiser, and I might make Soundwave more Cyberverse style, so he kind of fits that bruiser style. So little balances, trying to make everyone kind of work out. I guess Blitzwing could be a bruiser too. Yeah, I think that might fit better. And I'm also trying to figure out like gameplay balances of like how these characters would work. So for instance, I would want them to all have like one primary weapon and one sub weapon. And the primary weapon for like Optimus Prime is going to be his rifle, and his sub weapon is going to be his axe. He's going to be one of the few melee characters though, because the blaster he has is going to be really good at fire rate, damage, and what are we called? Firing rate. So firing rate, damage, and shot speed. That's what I was looking for. So basically like a good all-around weapon, and then when he gets in close, he can do heavier damage. And then that's kind of how I would balance out everyone's weapons. So like Prowl would have his shoulder blasters as weapons, and they would do heavy damage, but he couldn't fire them all that often. But then again, he also has his normal rifle. So the rifle is going to have less power behind it, but he can fire it faster. So a balance between the two weaponry. Bumblebee is going to have weaker weapons in general because of his character. That's just who he is. But he's got a smaller hitbox. It's much easier for him to dodge an enemy attack than it is, say, Ironhide. So that's where you balance Bumblebee out. Things like that to keep in mind. Like, I have not just like thrown characters in. Like, I'm trying to keep some kind of balance to make sure everyone has like a unique feel to them and still feels like themselves without anything broken. You know, Skywarp, for instance, I can't have on the Decepticon team. I can't have a teleporter that's going to break the gameplay. But that would be the roster of the characters. A lot of the other characters would be busy, but we'll get into that here in a minute. It's going to take longer than I thought, by the way. There's a lot of thoughts when it comes to this kind of thing. One of the other problems I have with most Transformer games is that they really tend to treat the vehicle mode like a run button. And I don't want that. I want the vehicle modes to actually matter. So in normal levels, the vehicle is going to be important. You can use it as a run button, yes, but there are going to be combat capabilities to the vehicle modes in some way, whether that is ramming with Optimus Prime, shooting with Megatron's tank turret, or just evasion, just like, transforming and like backing out of like a melee, so like if Sideswipe gets like surrounded by Sharkticons or something, he transforms to vehicle mode, he hits reverse, and he gets out of it a lot easier than if he tried to slug his way out. So on top of that, you would have sections in the level that would require the vehicle mode more than just ramping over stuff. By the way, you would have obstacles that, on foot are too fast for you to dodge. You have to be in vehicle mode to miss them. There'd be like little mini sequences where you'd have to be in vehicle mode for a while to properly advance. So not just a run button, but like gameplay that requires it. Gameplay that feels like the vehicle mode is the right way to go. And to that end, I would also do like little mini stages that are focused just on the vehicle mode. Ironically, the animated game for the DS had this with Prowl, and I would do something similar where it was either an escape or a chase sequence where you are in vehicle mode for a good length of time. And this is taking the vehicle mode driving mechanics, so it would have to be developed because it's Transformers, and giving them their own section of gameplay. And it would be railed. It would be on a rail, so you wouldn't have to like overthink what you're doing here. The point is to give a little bit of variety to the gameplay without making you like learn a completely different game or losing the personality and the design style of the main game. It's kind of like a break. It's just a break from the normal stuff in the game, right? And the Flyers would get the same thing. They'd be very similar in having stages where they flew to the next objective. And this is why I need tracks, so we have an Autobot flyer, right? It's either him or Swoop, and that makes a little bit more sense. So you have sections similar where it's on a rail again, and you are flying Star Fox style to dodge enemies and attack enemies, etc., etc. But for the most part, you're just flying through with the same mechanics that you were using during the normal stage. I have to fudge it a little bit to where like the jets can only go so high. Otherwise, they are going to kind of break gameplay. Same for the same reason why, like, I might have to storyline some reason why the triple changers only have one of their vehicle modes, because otherwise they'd break the gameplay. If you remember Transformers Tatakai, when you had the triple changers unlocked, you had a different version of each. Blitzwing had 2 variations, each with his different vehicle modes. I would have to work something similar because that would just kind of break things to have that advantage. You'd never play as anyone else if Blitzwing and Astro Train had all of their modes. So that's basic gameplay stuff, which has already taken way longer than I wanted it to. This is going to be a longer video. I apologize. We'll try to get through this a little bit quicker. So I do like the idea of a storyline where Earth is taken over by a force that makes the Autobots and Decepticons work together. I don't want it to be so overwhelming that it's post-apocalyptic. I'd like it to be like mid-invasion, where Autobots and Decepticons tried to handle this by themselves, got overwhelmed, and decided, well, you can't take over Earth if someone else takes over instead, so you're gonna have to cooperate with us. So we pick up where both Autobots and Decepticons have both failed to stop this threat. The threat this time is not Legion, it is the Quintessons. It's one of the few villains that can unite Autobot and Decepticon. And you know me, I love my Quintessons. They do not get enough love or attention, so we're going to give it to them here. So they are in the middle of an invasion of Earth. They have encampments, they have stations built up. It's almost as if they're in the beginnings of trying to terraform this into a new Cybertron. That's the vibe that you're getting. And a lot of it is the Quintesson thing. It's robot production. So your basic grunts are going to include Sharkticons and Alicons, along with whatever other like animal cons that we can come up with. Now, for boss characters, you're going to have the remaining you're going to have a bunch of remaining Transformers. There's some things that I've kind of separated off. Like Blaster's kind of going to be like a narrator type. You'll see what I've got done with some of these others, but there's going to be a lot of Autobots and Decepticons left on the wayside. They can work as mini bosses who have been like taken over by the Quintessons. But for big boss characters, that's where the combiners are. Because I need the combiners in the story somewhere. But I can't let you play as them. I can't let you play as individual bots or anything like that. So we're going to storyline them being taken over by the Quints. I do have a cooler plan for that, though. I do have a cooler plan for that in mind. So yeah, we've talked basically like, yeah, I want third-person gameplay. I want shooting-based gameplay because that's what you know Transformers for. If you are playing in the Transformers game, I want it to look like an episode of the cartoon where there's just a lot of enemy forces firing back and forth. To that end, even like in normal stages, like you would have sections where other Autobots who are not playable will appear. So Mirage and Sunstreaker might be off to the side, or like even just being like normal NPCs running around you who are participating in the fight. So you've got, orange and blue, like orange and purple laser beams firing across battlefields. Because that's what I want. I want it to look like an episode of the cartoon with those big melee, not melee, but like those big like ranged attack fights. But that said, I need variety. I need to break this up. So we already decided that like in order to make the vehicle forms a little bit more robust, they have their own stage sections where it focuses on them. You have a speed section with flying or driving. But I want the characters themselves to do things that you expect the characters to do. So this is where we introduce another alternate style of mission, which would be tower defense. So you're using the same game mechanics, but now the goal of the level has changed. And depending on which side you are playing as at the time, then different things happen. So for instance, Autobots, they play the defensive side of tower defense, right? So they are moving from point to point, trying to stop encroaching quintessons from attacking human cities or various other like human buildings or establishments, etc. They're being heroes. They're doing the hero thing. They're moving from point to point to stop the quintessons from like taking it over, and they have to defend it long enough for them to give up on it. Whereas the Decepticons are going to be doing what Decepticons do. They're going to raid energy. So when you have an intergalactic force trying to encroach on Earth, what's the best way to disable them and make their lives just a little bit more annoying? How about the Decepticons leech their fuel sources? So that is their version of the tower defense. Instead of moving from point to point to stop the enemies from encroaching on those spots, this time the Decepticons are going to be defending a single point. And also like in like enemy waves. So your point can get damaged along with your crew that you're playing as at the time. And this is also another great place for cameos where like Skywarp, Thundercracker, Insecticons, or Reflector are all getting away with Energon cubes as they fill up. But there's also like a risk because your Energon cubes are vulnerable. Because remember, Energon cubes got blown up a lot for the sake of stopping Decepticons. So I actually want that to be a threat in these particular sections. This is not going to be like a massive part of the gameplay. This is going to be like a few stages are going to revolve around this, just enough to kind of break up the monotony. But you're still in basically the same gameplay mode, which means I want to come up with something else where, yeah, I'm working with the same engine and the movements, but we are also adding some more variety to the game, like more little things to do that are just beside the main point. So like 60% is just the third person shooting portion. And then I just need like, I just need that 40% left, just work in some other gameplay mechanics and styles. So again, I want to do Transformer things. I want it to feel like a Transformer game. So this is where stealth sections come into play. Not heavy ones like Metal Gear Solid. If anything, these are going to feel more like puzzle sections. So you get a little bit of a chance to just not fight for a little bit. You have a stage where you can just kind of like put your mind to use rather than just keep everything alert and start shooting everything around you. So for the Autobot side of the story, if you're playing the Autobot campaign, you're playing as Bumblebee. And Bumblebee is using his small size to infiltrate, Quintesson bases and try to find information or try to sabotage something. But he is working with like a smaller body, sneaking around. His transformation would be able to not only get into like smaller crevices or even hide underneath things if he gets spotted, but also there would be like sections where like, okay, maybe the floor has been electrified, so he needs to transform to roll over it with his rubber tires. Little things like that, right? So just ways of using Bumblebee's small stature and his uniqueness in order to traverse a stealth section and accomplish a mission. On the Decepticon side, you're playing as Ravage. Now, the fun part about these stages is both of them have like the radar, just like Metal Gear Solid, and they have a top-down view you can switch to if you want to see what's going on in the area. On the Autobot side, it's provided by the Sky Spy. On the Decepticon side, it's provided by Laserbeak. So you're doing Soundwave sneaky stuff with his cassette bots, and that's where the fun comes in. And Ravage is a lot more stealth-based than even Bumblebee is, because he can get into smaller areas. He could also transform to either hide inside of a computer, or maybe if I could figure it out, maybe even like do the G1 thing of like transform in a place where like the guard patrol would pick him up and bring him somewhere else. So there might be like spots where you can only progress by like tricking them into taking you somewhere. That's not necessarily like a thing that will always play in, or I'm not sure even how I could get it to work that way, but it is a possibility. Again, I wanted to feel like you're playing as the characters and doing what they do in the cartoon. I also like the idea of, depending on how well you do, and like I would like the idea of both of these having like an escape afterwards. And depending on how well you do, determines how long the escape goes on for. But like once you reach like a finish line of the escape sequence, like I'm imagining like Cliffjumper there with his bazooka to handle anything that's chasing Bumblebee so they can get away, or for Laserbeak and Ravage to run into Rumble, who's going to earthquake things and put a stop to anything chasing them. It's just like little payoffs to where you can see like more of the team together. There's also a way we can play around with this a little bit more. So other aspects of the game I would love to pay tribute to G1 episodes by incorporating plot lines into stories. We're not retelling G1, but we're remixing the stories to include into stages to have a little bit more fun. So for instance, the Microbot episode, I'm using as inspiration for how you free the combiners from Quintesson mental control. So like you shrink down, you go inside, and it's the normal third person shooter gameplay, but now a completely different environment with completely different enemy styles. You're battling like internal Decepticon systems, rather than standard enemies from the Quintessons. You could also have stages based on like Fire in the Sky, where like it's in the Arctic and you're trying to free Jetfire. Things like that. So, again, ways of feeling like you're playing the cartoon without actually like just saying like we're playing the G1 cartoon. I also like the idea of collecting stuff for the sake of building up new weaponry and new abilities, or like leveling up characters. So that is what Ratchet is going to be doing for the Autobots, or it's going to be what Wheeljack does for the Autobot side and what Shockwave does for the Decepticon side. They're basically making sure that like you're upgraded, like whatever scrap you're collecting, they turn into new weaponry or they turn into upgrades for your characters. That's how that is done. I like progression systems like that. I also had this really great idea. I think this is a great idea. So I did mention we have the combiners being freed with this like microbot sequence and like little go inside them plot lines and stages. I'm picturing like just for fun levels where you're just running around smashing things the Quintessons have built. There'd be no, imagine like if you played Doom the Dark Ages, like the Titan levels, except I don't think I would put a giant robot into the mix here, unless maybe like it's like the last one would have like a boss level, where you're fighting like Trypticon or something. But for the most part, I think it's just I want every combiner that I would put into this game to have just one stage where they just stomp around breaking Quintesson stuff. So it's just literally you just get to smash and just have that like little like, again, a mental break. We are still in that third person mechanic and perspective, but we're slower and everything around us is a lot smaller and it's all breakable. And you can just smash stuff for fun. That's what I call a good mental break from just the typical like run around shooting stuff without breaking the core gameplay, and without losing the identity. So like that's the trick here, right? So we know we have to have the third person mechanic and the vehicle mechanic. So why not find ways of expanding both with different gameplay elements so it feels like we're still in the same game, but we're doing something different to give your brain a break and give you some variety. So that's the goal here. As far as other little things here, I love the idea of like DLC that would be throwing in like season 3 characters. So like a Rodimus Prime and Friends pack, a Galvatron and Friends pack. I love the idea of a Shattered Glass DLC where you flip what characters are playable. So like the Autobots are now playable in the Decepticon campaign and vice versa. And they're telling similar story beats. But everyone's recolored to Shattered Glass. And the whole thing would be revoiced. So you're getting a different gameplay experience, getting to play through like the Autobot campaign with tanks or the Decepticon campaign with Grimlock, but you are getting a different story on top of that. Like it's basically the same story beats, because I'm not going to be able to change like the pattern or the order that the stages happen in, but you're getting the Shattered Glass version of it. So, and that's extreme for a DLC, but I love the idea of it. I love the idea of being able to just play it in reverse. I also like collectibles in games. I figure, let's throw like 100 Kremzeeks in the game just to find. You know, and they'd be easy to spot. You know, if you get close enough, you start hearing him chirping his name like a Pokemon. And then in each stage, one of these. A mint-in sealed box transformer. Just to add to a vintage G1 shelf, you go back to the Ark in between stages, and you just like, you can wander around the Ark to go to like Wheeljack, or to like go to Ratchet for quick repairs or something, or to talk to the other Autobots or whoever's there, really. And just see the shelf of toys that you have accumulated. And I love the idea. And the wrap up to all of this is I love what Sonic Adventure games did with their stories. So if you beat Autobot and Decepticon campaigns, you would have one final mini campaign where Optimus is playable, and Megatron is the sidekick, or vice versa, and just have like this one final charge against like the final threat of the Quintessons. You know, both stories, both campaigns should have a satisfying resolution, you know, for like, you know, Optimus Prime, you know, preserving the peace, you know, leading to the, you know, the defeat of the Quintessons, and Megatron feeling like he's now cleared the way to take, you know, to properly take over Earth and maybe, you know, get one over on the Autobots while they're weak from all this battling, you know. So, and then if you beat both, you get that one final campaign. It gives you the true ending, true final boss, you know, light our darkest hour and all that. So it's a much longer video than I intended, but this is a Patreon request, so I wanted to throw everything I could at it. And obviously, I've got a million thoughts as to what I would want in a Transformer game. This is just me throwing out some of them. You know, if I wanted to put in a proper pitch, we'd probably be here another 2 hours. So we're going to leave it at that. So, as usual, in the comment section below, please let me know what you thought, any ideas you would have for a Transformer game, or if you'd be willing to play the one that I just came up with. So, that's going to be it from me. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.
Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.